This is Grandpa Tom that you're talking
Grandpa
about.
Tom.
Our dad's father. He came over from England.
Before the Civil War.
Yes. He got off the boat at Bath. He worked on the farms around Bath. Married Mary Fletcher. He didn't get his eye put out in the war. He got an infection and lost his eye. They had a couple of children.
All but one died died as children of typhoid. Aunt Lizzie was the only one that lived.
And then later, he married our grandmother, Charity. And they had, how many kids they have? 5?
Aunt Lizzie.
Grandma Charity raised her. Took, when they got married, Grandma Charity took over and raised her to adult. I don't ever remember seeing her.
No.
I remember seeing her children, but not her.
She married Al and
Strike-Miller.
Yeah, Strike-Miller.
Al Strike-Miller.
And he had Al and Piercy and Ernie. But Aunt Lizzie married Al's dad, and he had 4 or 5 boys.
And Uncle Al was one of them. We always called him Uncle Al.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because he was so close to the family.
Well,
Now, Ernie Eisenhart was Dad's nephew.
Yeah, he was half nephew.
Great Grandpa Robert. No, I don't.
I don't either. Of course, he was dead long before I ever.
He died in 1950.
Now, I got a letter in here from the Greenwoods that tells a little bit about Grandpa Robert.
Let's talk about Grandma Charity, your grandmother. She died in 1937. There was quite a period between when Grandpa Tom died and she died.
Grandpa Tom broke his leg, and he suffered, terrible. They used a wooden
Stake or something.
stake for him to walk with, and he couldn't work like he did, and he just really worried himself to death. He couldn't get around very good with it. Mom had a lot of respect for Grandpa Tom. Said he was a great guy.
Grandma Charity, your grandmother, your father's mother.
I've heard that she was, I believe,
1/4.
1/4 Indian.
I've also heard that she had quite a temper.
She had a very bad temper, and she laid that on to when her mother was pregnant with her. They had a dog, and it had fits. Sent a curse on her all the rest of her life. She had terrible headaches. She always laid it on to that dog. The only time I know where she lived was in Kilburn. But they lived at the farm. Her and Grandpa Tom lived where Dad bought the farm.
Yeah, but they lived over where George Friend lived first, when Dad was a kid. And then they were moved to Missouri. Took a team of horses and moved all the furniture and stuff to Missouri. He bought a little farm down Missouri. And they was down there only a year, I think. And then they moved back and bought the house where all West kids was born.
We went there a lot. Dad kept her in wood and meat and stuff like that. Done a lot of things for her. And we'd go to visit her, and she'd come out to the house. But I wasn't close to her. What you saw would say close. I never ever stayed overnight with her. She would want me to, but I just never did want to, because I wasn't.
More or less afraid.
And she wore a bun, and I can remember combing her hair, when I was a kid. She died when I was about 8, I guess.
You said more or less afraid of her, huh?
Yeah. She'd blame me for everything.
Now, see, I didn't know that.
I've heard that Grandpa would go over there and take her things and do things for her. She wouldn't ever offer you a cookie or anything like that, Things that you would think of a grandmother doing, she just wasn't like that. Besides Grandpa, he had several brothers and sisters.
Uncle John.
I remember Uncle John from his glass eye. He was quite an inventor.
She called him Bullfrog John because he built a pond and had the great big old black bullfrog. He raised dogs.
Lyle and Wilmer inherited a lot from Uncle John. Doing things, they'd jump in and, like Lyle was going to raise mushrooms, in his basement, and he went to all this trouble and hauled in all that manure, I guess, and dirt and everything, and he never ever raised a, you know, he was gonna, big deal. He was gonna
Uncle
raise-
Lyle had a lot of different schemes like that.
Yeah,
didn't he?
all through his life, he was always trying something different, and Wilmer was a lot like that. Uncle John was that way, not Dad.
I remember Uncle John living here in Havana, and he more or less lived with his dogs, and he slept with the dogs.
In the basement.
He was quite a character, because he'd sit up on Main Street and pop his eye out for me, you know. He'd pop his eye out, and he had that glass eye, and he was always fun to be around. Now, somebody told me that he invented the air conditioner.
It wasn't an air conditioner, he just put a fan in the window and put a sack over, a gunny sack, and he run water on that gunny sack and turned that fan on and then blow that cool air through that gunny sack, and that water running on that, and it did cool your house. You just let it just run just a little bit to keep that sack wet. And he took Dad and them down there on Patterson Bay and borrowed somebody's car and went down there on the ice and drove out on the ice, Dad said. And he'd get that Model T going just as hard as it could go, and he'd slam on the brakes and turn these wheels and just spin around on that ice. And that's it. He'd done that several times, and up the bank he went, and back to Bath. He run a garage and back.
Dad would have a job to do, you know, like put up hay, had everything ready to start early, and Uncle John would always come dragging in about 10 o'clock. That'd make Dad so mad, you'd tell him he might as well go on back home. Uncle John was just that kind of a guy.
Well, there's some
Dad
of your
was
brothers and sisters were like that too.
They were just different. Dad was a saver. His family came first, and Uncle John, if he get a bright idea, why, he'd spend all the money he had to try to accomplish that, then it wouldn't amount to anything after he got it accomplished.
Of course, I remember Grandpa very well. Of course, he was born Benjamin Franklin. He was younger than Uncle John. He never liked the name Benjamin. Somewhere along the line, he changed his name to Frank B. I remember Grandpa at Christmas time, we all got together at Christmas time down at his house and pretty much filled that house. And the whole cellar would be full of food. And I remember him standing on his head, come and put a pillow down in the middle, and all the grandchildren would be around, and he'd stand on his head.
And he did that just a few years before he died. He was an old man when he could still stand on his head.
Yeah.
He was 89 when he died, and it was just a few years.
And he drove, you know, he had an accident when he probably shouldn't have been driving.
When us kids would say, you know, we thought it was time for him to give up the car, he'd say, I can drive just as good as I ever did. I am not near the minutes on the road as those drunks. He had that wreck, it would have been their anniversary, the 9th of May, and he was in the hospital a few weeks, and then he went home June the 7th and was,
Buried
he
on
died
his birthday.
on Melvin's birthday and was buried on his birthday, the 10th of June. I mean, their anniversaries when he had the wreck, he died on Melvin's birthday and was buried on his birthday.
There was an old lady that had a buggy and a horse, and they strode the roads, and they just had wheel tracks for the buggies to go on, and the horse always run in the middle of the
Ruts.
road. So they went out and they dug holes just as deep as they could reach with their arm right in the buggy tracks. They dug 2 here and then they dug 2 on the other side. About how far the buggy wheels was apart. The old lady, they knowed she always went to town certain times, so whenever she come along, they was hid in the timber. She come along and the wheels fell down in them holes, and the horse just walked right on out, right out of this single tree, and then out of the shaft. They broke the single tree, and they went around, and come up walking up the roads, and they helped the old
What
lady.
happened, huh?
An old fella that raised watermelon. Anytime they'd go over there, why, they'd go there in case they wanted a watermelon. They'd say, boys, you want a watermelon? Oh, we don't care. Well, if you don't care, I don't care. We won't eat it. We won't cut any. He said they only went over there a time or two till they say they wanted watermelon. He said there was an old man that chucked corn, and he always wore an overcoat. And Dad said, ask him how come he wore that overcoat of shucking corn. It's too hot. And he said, what'll keep out heat will what'll keep out cold will keep out heat. Dad was putting up a stove, put up an old heating stove, and he couldn't get the flue to go in the chimney, or he couldn't get the pipes together, and he worked and worked and worked, and he kept getting madder and madder, and pretty soon he just throwed the stovepipe down on the floor and just tromped it as flat as a paper. He didn't think he had the money to buy new pipe. So he went out to the barn and he worked over an hour or more to straighten that pipe out so he could get it together so we'd have heat now.
So Grandpa had a little bit of a temper.
Yeah, he did. One time Mom made coffee, and she only had just a little bit of coffee, so she tried to stretch it and make it a whole pot full. So whenever Dad got his coffee, he said, I can see the bottom of that cup. And he said he tasted it, and he said pretty soon he just grabbed all the cups off the table and threw them on the floor and broke the cups. Mama had to clean up the mess. Said the next time he wanted coffee to drink, he had to drink it out of a tin can. One time Dad got a western horse, bought it from Paul Fran in Kilburn, and me and Dad was out messing, and we had 15 or 20 bushel of rye on a wagon. He had a team of horses hitched up that wagon, and one horse balked. It wouldn't even tighten the tugs. Dad told me and said, you go get the tractor. And I said, we'll tie a rope around his belly and we'll make him pull that wagon. So I went and got the tractor. Dad got a hay rope out of the barn and he tied it around his belly and run it through his collar and tied it to the tractor, and he said, now put that tractor in fourth gear and let out on the clutch and just go right out. Well, I done as he told me, and whenever he tied that rope up, that old horse went, and it tore the collar right in two, and where the heaves was fastened to the collar, it broke it in two. And we had to put on a whole new collar, but whenever Dad clucked with that tractor out in front, it said that horse would take off. One time he was saying that he done that and the horse wouldn't, so he built a fire underneath that horse. And he said that horse pulled that wagon up far enough that caught the wagon on. All of me and Lyle was cultivating corn one day, and Lyle had the tractor. He had a two-row cultivator. It was on Saturday night. Dad said whenever we got that field done, why we could go to town. We was a hurrying. Lyle, he had come out the end with the tractor, and he had shoved both levers ahead to raise up the front ones, and by that time the back one would be back, and he'd rear it up, and round he'd go back through the field. I was taking a one-row cultivator. We just had 3 rows left. Lyle was on 2 rows, and I was on one of the rows. He'd come up behind me. I couldn't only go so fast, but he was going faster than I was, and he kept nudging me, and pretty soon he run the tractor right up on the cultivator wheel. Before he got stopped, it had a big bend in that wheel. So we went home. Lyle had to finish that, but we got home, and Dad didn't like that very well because we was hurrying too much. I don't know if I ever seen Dad work on Sunday. That was his haircutting day. He had 8 boys, and about every week, why, he'd cut so many of them hair. And he had an old pair of clippers that, I don't know, after he cut so many hair, they'd get dull, and every time he'd raise them up, he'd pull hair out. So you always hated to get a haircut, but about every 2 weeks you'd get a haircut. You'd do 4 of them one day,
And he cut all the neighbor kids' hair too. Lindsay boys, Hobart Turner, everybody'd flock in. I can remember that mess.
Mom would kill a couple old hens and make noodles, and we'd have a regular feast. Play ball in the afternoon out in the hog pasture with an old wooden board and a ball made out of twine out of socks. You'd unravel a sock and you'd just keep wrapping that till you had a ball about that big around. You had an old rag ball and a piece of board to play ball with.
You couldn't go to the store and buy a ball. You know, I probably got
Was too
25
far.
balls in my house.
You didn't have the money and you couldn't go. It was too far to town to go. So you done with what you had?
About once a week, Mom would go to Kilburn and get groceries. She'd buy a 48-pound sack of flour then, and she would make bread 2 or 3 times a week, and she had a big cabinet, make 13 loaves of bread at a time, and then she'd make
In the wheat
long
bin, and he
johns
hit it.
and get donuts.
You know,
Some
you say
kind
nice.
of harvested grain, long take a whole load of wheat down to donuts. In the summertime, after we harvested grain, then take a whole load of wheat down to back. Have it made in flour, making the flour. Get so much on home and we'd have it back overhead. They'd keep some up there so making the flour. We'd come home and we'd stick it by overhead in the pan. That up there so the mice and stuff. Christmas time, one time he bought a whole keg, 25-pound keg. Christmas time in a wooden keg, and he took it out, hid it, 25-pound keg, took it out and put it up over his in a wooden keg, and he took it out, hid it, mice or rats or anything, and took it out, put it up over his in the green. When he went out to get the mice or rats or anything, he'd get into it.
I remember him getting candy and stuff, and he hid it in the wheat bin. I remember what it was in, but I remember candy and stuff. I don't even remember what it was in, but I put it in the back room. Burying it in the wheat. He just couldn't put it in the back room because the kids left it nice for us kids.
Grandma and Grandpa had 11 children. One daughter died in infancy. The other 10 of you, 8 boys and 2 girls, grew to be adults, all healthy. Kind of a testament to Grandma, first of all, having that. She must have stayed pregnant every 2 years.
Well, the first boys were every year. Frankie was 1908, Wilmer was 1909, and then we jumped down to 1911. Heating stove and an old cook stove.
In a 4-room house.
Growed a garden, and she canned everything she could get her hands on.
Mostly pigs, huh?
Yeah, for the summertime meat, she would fry down sausage and put in big stone jars, put it in the cellar. Then she'd cold pack a lot of meat. Boy, she was ready for colder weather to get some fresh meat. Had chickens, had her own eggs.
You and Aunt Venus were the only girls growing up with
8
all
boys.
these brothers.
She was busy cooking and doing dishes and spring house cleaning. We'd take the beds all apart, take them outside and air them and clean them and bring them back in. Oh, that was a chore.
She was a couple of years older than Grandpa. I think when they got married, she was 20 and Grandpa was 18. And she died in 1960. She was diabetic. She always had to have insulin shots. I remember her making this peanut butter candy, long roll peanut butter candy. She had high morals.
She wouldn't allow a deck of cards in the house. The boys, they'd buy a deck and then they'd go up in the hayloft and play cards. Anytime she'd find them cards, she'd destroy them.
We could go outdoors, pitch pennies or something like that. She didn't like it, but we was outdoors. Dad and Uncle John was young fellows. They went down to a Halloween party down to Bethel Church. Every young man and them had buggy horses. Farmer had a fence out by the church. And there was a guy that they didn't think too much of, so he parked his buggy pretty close to this fence, took the wheels off in the buggy and slipped it through a woven wire fence, put the wheel back on. When that young fella come out to get in his buggy, why, he clucked his horse, turned it, and said, just broke the whole inside the wheels out. Front and back one. It was Halloween, and they tied the dummy up in a tree, and there's a guy that wasn't real smart. One guy crawled up in that tree, and he had a rope around that dummy's neck. Guy come back by on a horseback. They dropped that down in front of us. He took off. Another time they stealing this old man's watermelon patch. There was a guy that wasn't real smart, so they'd play a trick on him. So they went and told the old farmer that they was going to get in these watermelon patch that night. And come out there and load a shotgun. Whenever they got out there in that watermelon patch, for him to shoot up in the air. Kid that was with them that wasn't real smart. There's a barbed wire fence, and he run right through that barbed wire fence. He said he was running fast enough he could hear them BBs buzzing by his head. Well, in later years, at Christmas time.
So Grandma and Grandpa weren't big
No,
church
not,
growers.
no.
They had too much company on Sunday.
Mom had to cook for the company, and all the cousins always liked to come to our house because it was a bunch there.
In the
Anything to
wintertime.
make a dime.
Anything to make a dime to get through the Depression. During the Depression, I've heard that Grandpa used to cut ice.
Well, you hauled it from Patterson Bay. They had an ice house in Bath. You got $1.25 a day for a team of horses, a wagon, and saw blocks of ice out and haul it to Bath and put it in that ice house. One time he fell, when he would get a block of ice out, he fell in the ice water and got soaking wet. His clothes would freeze. He couldn't miss out on that $1.25 a day, so he just walked all day to keep warm in these outside breeches. His body kept him warm because there wasn't no air that could go through his clothes.
Just to get that $1.25.
$1.25.
And he sold duck.
And he cut wood. And I don't know how, but I know the other boys, older than I, must have cut wood too, because Lionel and I, they were Saturday's job. We would cut down trees and saw them in chunks, and Dad would split them up during the week and haul them in, and he had a saw on the front of the tractor. And he'd get a great big pile while we'd cut that wood, and he'd sell that wood for $1.25 a load. We used it for heat too.
Besides keeping Grandma in wood.
I don't know how many wood customers Dad had. Dad only went to school for 3 years. Well, he was a young man when he was going to school, 17, 18 years old. They only went part of the time, so he only went to school for 3 years. Somebody dug, probably somebody's school, so them young boys decided they would tin can that dog. So they got a can and they punched some holes in it and put some rocks in it and tied it to that dog's tail and then scared him, and that rattled, and he took off and just run around the inside the schoolhouse and just get all the way around. Around the desk, teacher's desk. Teacher rung the bell and said, "Boys," said, "we ain't gonna have no school today," said, "we've had too much dog." So they got out of school there.
I remember Grandpa doing that to several dogs, and he would tie the tin cans, the dog up to the clothesline first, and then put the rocks on the dog, and then let go of it, and the dog would just run like crazy.
When our river was real small, they was a ditch about a mile or so away from home. Lyle and I and our Robert, Virgil, we'd walk over to dirt and ditch, and we'd go swimming. And our Robert was little. Our Robert told me this, but I didn't remember. Said we'd take him over there and we'd swim, and so that Grandma wouldn't know that we went swimming, why, we'd roll him in the sand before we went back home.
So Grandma would think you'd been playing. Uncle Frankie was the oldest of the children.
I was in Frankie and Margaret's wedding. I was 8 years old. They got married in 1936. Charlie and Ruby weren't married then, and they stood up with Frankie and Margaret. When we practiced in the morning of the wedding, well, I don't know why they practiced with the rings, but they did. It was a double ring ceremony. She put Frankie's ring on him, and his finger swelled, and they had to take him to town and have that sawed in two. So he had a wedding band that was sawed in two for the wedding. I remember before the wedding, Mom told Dad, Wanda is going to have a permanent for this wedding. Said, said, I wanna get her a permanent, and Dad, he didn't think it was necessary. Anyway, Mom got the money together and took me to Havana, and I got a permanent. When Dad seen me, oh, he was so tickled, and I never had to beg for a permanent after that.
That's 'cause she's baby of family.
Well, I had it pretty good because the folks had more money and the rest of them had all left the nest. And then I stayed around home till I was probably 22.
Frankie was working in Iowa,
Right.
and that's where he met Aunt Margaret.
He had a job here, working out here for a horse, and they moved to Iowa to farm. Frankie went with him as a hired man.
Harold Harst.
I heard a story one time that Uncle Frankie had gotten a new truck, a new dump truck, and was working with it, and came back not too long later, brand new truck, remember Grandpa telling. It was all beat up, and he was just so disappointed in Uncle Frankie that that truck had got so beat up. The next child was Uncle Wilmer,
Married very young. Aunt Bertha was 14, I think.
and Uncle Wilmer wasn't too much older, so she was 15, and he was 21. And our Robert was his oldest son, and he was sort of part of your generation in many ways.
He was a couple years younger than I.
He was more like Uncle John. He was always inventing something, and he had an old car. That's the first car I ever drove in my life. He was working with Dad, and he was driving the tractor. Had that old car out there, and I'd walked over to the field where Wilmer told me to go get his truck, and I said, I don't know how to drive. Well, he said, I'll go with you, and you'll learn. There was just an old car stripped down, and you sat on the gas tank put near. He had a little old box built on it, and he had great big tires on it. And I got in there, and he said, well, you'll have to back up to turn it around. Well, he had plowed on each side. I was in the where it hadn't been plowed. Well, I put it in reverse, and whenever I backed up, I just shoved it to the floor, and we hit that furrow, just kabang. He had me started out, and he said, now when you get to the other end, just turn the key off, and it'll stop.
Every time we had a family get-together, Wilmer would always start a water fight before we'd go to our separate places. That was a big deal for him to get everybody wet.
I've heard that Grandma, though,
She liked it too.
Uncle Lloyd married after Grandpa retired. Uncle Lloyd moved into the old homestead.
He was out and working. When they got so old, why, there were some younger ones to take their place, so they got out and got them a job. Now, Homer and Lloyd both worked up to, one of them worked for Bushy, and one of them worked for Ed Frazee. I think Dad would take them up there, and they stayed all week, and they'd come home on